Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor for me to speak today to you, to the citizens of this district, the Fermana and Oma district. I'm delighted actually. I haven't been to North Ireland. It's my first visit, although it's an online. And I very much thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. And also, I realized how little we know about each other, and in the same time, how much we have in common. So when I started, reading more about the history of North Ireland, now I realized how many similarities we have in our history. So the title of my lecture is 1,300 years of turbulent history. And just a second. Actually, it's 1,340 years exactly since the very first Bulgarian state was established. As a small country, it's natural to have a turbulent history because, in my opinion, small countries are rarely masters of their own fate. And so they are neighboring with powerful, big countries, big powers that play important role, not necessarily positive role. So I will try to summarize this 1,340 years in 1 hour, and just to go briefly through the whole history of Bulgaria, the main points, and to give you the idea about our history, and especially for the young people, for the students who probably don't know anything about our country. And that's why for the young students, I will just start with the fact that Bulgaria is a country in the southeastern part of Europe on the Balkan Peninsula, with a territory of 111,000 square kilometers and a population of approximately 7 million people. Used to be more, but many people left abroad after the fall of communism in Bulgaria. So it's around 7 million people, the population of Bulgaria. And so the country is, the capital is Sofia, and our neighbors are on the east, it's the Black Sea, the border, but behind the Black Sea is Russia, which is a big and powerful country which played important role in our history. And on the west, we are bordering with Serbia and the Republic of North Macedonia. On the north is the Danube River and Romania. And from the south, we have as neighbors Greece and Turkey. Turkey also a big country that has, a special role in our history. So I will start very, very briefly with the first Bulgarian state, when and how it was established. The very first Bulgarian state was established in 681, which is the 7th century. And there are three demographic elements of the state. So the local population in these lands used to be the Thracians. They were different tribes, but they were, not many in number. They were somehow in decline in this period. So this element will be very quickly assimilated. So the second demographic element in the Bulgarian state were the Slavs. Many Slavic tribes living on this territory. They were not united. They were, many Slavic tribes here. And the third element, demographic element, are the Proto-Bulgarians. They were a Turkic tribe coming from Central Asia. They crossed the Danube River, arrived here in these lands, and they found the Slavs. The Slavic tribes, they outnumbered significantly the Proto-Bulgarians, but the Proto-Bulgarians, they were the element that knew how to build a state. They had the idea of statehood because in Central Asia, they used to have their own country, their own state. So actually the strongest element were the Proto-Bulgarians, and they made a union here with the many Slavic tribes. And together they fought Byzantium, the Byzantine Empire, the big power at that time. And so the Bulgarian state was established in 681 after a successful battle against the Byzantine Empire. So the Byzantine Empire had to, recognize the new Bulgarian state. This state was a pagan state or barbarian state because, the different tribes, they worship different gods, they were polytheistic. So the most important event during the first Bulgarian state was the acceptance of Christianity. In the 9th century, the year is 864, it's the 9th century, Bulgarians converted to Christianity. They accepted Christianity from Byzantium, from which is natural. Byzantium is the powerful neighbor and the leading civilization in Europe at that time. It was the Christian civilization. So it was a political decision taken by the Bulgarian ruler, Tsar Boris, who decided to convert the Bulgarians to Christianity. And it was an act of major importance for the development of Bulgaria and its culture for two main reasons. First of all, to join the leading European civilization of the time and to be considered, civilized country, not barbarian anymore. And also to assist in the integration of the Slavs and the Proto-Bulgarians by facilitating the developing of unifying culture as Christianity was seen to be. So actually it's a very important event that happened during the first Bulgarian state, Bulgarian kingdom. And another one also in the 9th century was the invention of the written Slavic language. It's the Cyrillic alphabet, actually. It was created by Kirill and Methodi, two brothers. That's why we call it Cyrillic, by the name of one of them, Kirill. And actually, the spread of the Slavic language invented by the two brothers was facilitated by the Bulgarian kings at that time, as they realized well the significance of an official language for the consolidation of the Bulgarian state. And the followers, the pupils of Kirill and Methodi established language schools in Bulgarian lands and spread the new language. So especially for the young people, because they don't know, and sometimes, it's not very clear, but let them know that, yes, the Slavic alphabet, the Cyrillic alphabet was invented in Bulgarian lands and developed there. And then the Russians took it from us, not vice versa. And And of course, then some other countries also adopted this alphabet. So, of course, the First Bulgarian Kingdom had its ups and downs, and the end of this First Bulgarian Kingdom was at the beginning of the 11th century. At the beginning of the 11th century, the Byzantine Empire, the Byzantine Emperor, conquered the Bulgarian lands because it was a constant, constant battles and between Bulgaria and Byzantium. Of course, this is the way it was in that ages. So after many wars between the two countries, eventually the First Bulgarian Kingdom was conquered by the Byzantines, and the Byzantine rule lasted for 168 years, actually until 1186. But the Byzantine rule didn't change in any fundamental way the demographic character of the Bulgarian lands, and also didn't change, the religion was the same, so it's there was no difference. Eastern Orthodox religion, also the tax system was very similar with the Byzantine one. So actually this Byzantine rule didn't change in a fundamental way the demographic or other character of Bulgaria, because we will have another rule later on, which will change dramatically the situation, but it's not the Byzantine. So it was not, it was logical that after several uprisings and, there was a successful revolution by two brothers, Ansen and Peter, who re-established the Bulgarian state. After 168 years of Byzantine rule, the Bulgarians managed to regain their country, and we have from the end of the 12th century, from 1186 until the end of the 14th century, we have the second Bulgarian kingdom, the second Bulgarian state. Of course, this kingdom also had its greatest times and difficult periods as well. Again, a lot of wars with Byzantium and with other countries in Europe. But I will go very briefly, and I will just say what was the end of the second Bulgarian state. And it was at the end of the 14th century when the Ottoman Turks set their foot on the Balkan Peninsula. And because the Balkan countries were not united and they didn't foresee the threat coming from the Ottomans, actually, it was not difficult for the Ottoman Turks to conquer the Balkan Peninsula. And at the end of the 14th century, they conquered Bulgaria too. So at the end of the 14th century, the very end of the 14th century, the Ottoman Turks conquered Bulgaria, and an Ottoman rule started in the country that lasted for 5 centuries. 500 years Bulgarians were under Ottoman rule, and it was very different from the Byzantine rule for many reasons. First of all, the new conqueror, the Ottoman Turks, they are Muslims. So for them, the Christian population, including the Bulgarians, but all the Christian populations were considered like not equals, like, second-hand citizens of the empire. So the Bulgarians not only lost their freedom, they lost much more than that. Demographically, first of all, most of the Bulgarians, of course, many of them died in the process of conquest because they fought. There was a resistance, of course. So, and the rest of the people had to withdraw from the cities and to settle down into the villages in the mountains where they could live and cultivate the land and, you know, to leave the cities for the Ottomans rulers. The official status of the Christian population in the Ottoman Empire was Raya, which is actually second-class citizens. And the main obligation of the citizens, the Raya, was to stay loyal to the state, not to obey, and to pay taxes. So they couldn't go to the army, they couldn't occupy any positions in the empire, just cultivate the land, pay taxes, lots of taxes. And some people, even some historians, used to call this period a slavery. Of course, it's not a slavery in the academic, from academic point of view, but the Christians and the Bulgarians in particular were deprived of most of their rights. Many Bulgarians were forced to convert to Islam forcefully, so many died. Those who resisted were killed, especially in the first century after the conquest. Another very negative, the negative consequences from the Ottoman rule was the liquidation of the Bulgarian church. It was liquidated, and religiously the Bulgarians came under the jurisdiction of the Constantinople Patriarchate, actually under the Greek jurisdiction, because in Constantinople or in Istanbul, the Greek clerics, they were the head of the Patriarchate. So the Christian population in the Ottoman Empire was under the jurisdiction of the Greeks. And also the liquidation of the Bulgarian nobility was something very bad that happened because the Ottoman authority actually they beheaded the Bulgarian elite. You know, they killed all the nobles and the elite, the leading class. And that's why for 5 centuries, for 500 years, the Bulgarians stayed under the Ottoman rule. Of course, we have different stages of the resistance, many uprisings and resistance against the Turks during these 5 centuries. But actually, it was not before the beginning of the 19th century, end of 18th, the beginning of 19th century, when the Bulgarian period of revival happened, revival or awakening. It's connected with the rise of a Bulgarian merchant class. So because at the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th, we already have quite wealthy Bulgarian merchants. Okay, they couldn't occupy any positions, no matter how wealthy they become, because, they traded in the huge market of the Ottoman Empire. So this merchant class, facilitated and made possible the Bulgarian cultural and national awakening. Because these people, they sent their children to Europe to study in Europe, and when they returned, they transmitted the ideas of the European Enlightenment to the Ottoman Bulgarian lands. So gradually, this process started of awakening, if I can say that. And we have actually three different processes going on simultaneously, three movements, which actually make this period of revival possible. The first movement is the movement for the rebirth of the Bulgarian culture, and you know, to remember that you had your own culture, okay, the language was preserved, obviously, but you know, to remember that the Bulgarians had their kingdoms, their glorious story before the conquest, that they have their own culture, their own identity. So this movement for rebirth of the Bulgarian culture started mainly with school, first religious schools, Christian schools that were gradually being replaced by secular schools. And in the middle of the 19th century, more and more Bulgarians returned from abroad, from their studies in Europe. So they brought the advanced ideas of the time and the modern educational system. The other movement was the one for the re-establishment of the autonomous Bulgarian church, because the church was liquidated at the end of the 14th century with the conquest. So this battle was a diplomatic battle, and it happened in Constantinople, in Istanbul, because this battle for Bulgarian church was actually not against the Turks, but against the Greeks, the Patriarchate in Constantinople. Of course, with the validation of the Turkish Sultan, who has the final word. But the religious battle was, the Greek clerics to be serving in the Bulgarian lands to be replaced by Bulgarians. And so it became successful, this battle in 1860. In 1860, Bulgarian church, autonomous Bulgarian church, was declared, and it was officially recognized by the Sultan 10 years later, in 1870. And the third movement in this 19th century was the national liberation movement, the armed resistance. Of course, you cannot regain your state without also the armed resistance. So we have the leaders of our national movement, national revolution.
Rumina, you are on mute.
Yeah, a second.
Sorry, by mistake. Thank you for this. So those national heroes of Bulgarian liberation movement, of course, they died either in battles with the Turks, or they were caught and executed by the Ottoman authorities. So we had our heroes, we had our uprisings, many uprisings also happened. I will mention only the last and the biggest one. It's the April Uprising of 1876. It was the most important of all uprisings because it was a big one, but it was so heavy-handed by the Turks and so cruel in fact that caused European outrage against the Ottoman Empire. The atrocities were huge. I'm not going into details, but more than 200 European newspapers at the time write about the atrocities of the Turks in the April Uprising. Russian, French, and American journalists came to Bulgaria. They provided evidence. They shared the story with the world. The correspondent of Daily News, January Magaham, also provided evidence about that. He even influenced the prime minister, the Israeli, to shape his opinion about the Ottoman Empire and the Bulgarian cause, the cause of these people fighting here. And William Gladstone wrote about this. There is a special brochure written by Gladstone, the atrocities in the Bulgarian lands. Giuseppe Garibaldi as well, Oscar Wilde, Victor Hugo, Dostoevsky, Charles Darwin, many names I could mention here of people who raised their voice after the April Uprising, and actually made Europe pay attention to this very small these people here fighting for centuries against the Ottomans. And it was important from diplomatic point of view. But still, the armed resistance is obviously the, the way that things happened, not only with the diplomacy. The Bulgarians couldn't liberate themselves alone, by themselves only. And the liberation came as a result of a Russian-Turkish war, one of the many Russian-Turkish wars, but the April Uprising was also one more reasons for the Russians to start a war against the Ottoman Empire. Of course, it's not the most important reason, but it was one of the reasons also to for the Russians to help their Christian brothers here. And so Bulgaria was liberated as a result of the Russian-Turkish War in 1878. And of course, the Bulgarians participated very actively on the side of the Russians. They fought, of course, but Bulgaria was liberated with the help of the Russians. And of course, Russia will play an important role when the new state will be established. After 500 years, after 5 centuries of Ottoman rule, the Bulgarians had their own country again, the third Bulgarian state, the modern Bulgarian state. The Treaty of San Stefano, this is the treaty signed after the victory of the Russia in the Russian-Turkish War. The treaty was signed in San Stefano on the 3rd of March, 1878. I mentioned the date because it's the national day of Bulgaria. So this is our day, the day of San Stefano, when the dream for to have again the Bulgarian state actually came true. The treaty provided for the establishment of an autonomous Bulgarian kingdom, whose borders included all the Bulgarian populated lands. And we have data for the Bulgarian population, the ethnic population of these lands from the church, from the archives, and you know what people declared to the church. So we know that these are our not only historically Bulgarian lands, but also populated by ethnic Bulgarians. So it was a great achievement and euphoria, of course, among the Bulgarians, but it didn't last long because the Treaty of San Stefano was seen as a triumph of Russia and the Russian power by the other big European powers, and especially by Great Britain, which was always concerned with the preservation of the balance of power in the continent. So unfortunately, British diplomacy led the Congress of Berlin just several months after the Treaty of San Stefano. And the Congress of Berlin revoked the Treaty of San Stefano. So we have a new treaty, the Treaty of Berlin, which was, well, if I say disappointment, it's not actually enough. It was such a heavy blow for Bulgaria because the new Treaty of Berlin provided for a small Bulgarian principality, autonomous Eastern Romania, another part, as an autonomous in the Ottoman Empire, and the third part of Bulgarian lands, which is Macedonia. I use it here as a geographical term, of course, because Macedonia is a geographically is divided, between several countries, but this part of Macedonia, which is historically Bulgarian. So instead of having the three parts, let's put it this way, three lands populated by Bulgarians, to have it in one state, we have only one small principality. On the southern part of Bulgaria was the so-called Eastern Romania, like an autonomous in the Ottoman Empire, and Macedonia actually remained completely in the Ottoman Empire. So we have a new Bulgarian state, but we have most of the Bulgarians living either still in the Ottoman Empire, not liberated, or in this Eastern Romania, the south part of Bulgaria. So just for a comparison, to tell you that the territories inhabited by Bulgarians were about 170,000 square kilometers. What the new state got after the Berlin Treaty was only 63,000 square kilometers from this territory. So from that moment on, you can imagine what will be the main purpose of the Bulgarian foreign policy for all the years ahead. The Balkan Wars, First World War, Second World War, only one goal for Bulgaria, one thing that the Bulgarians wanted: national unification. National unification, to have those three parts of historically belonging to Bulgaria and populated by ethnic Bulgarians, to be united in one country. So actually the unification between the Principality of Bulgaria and Eastern Romania happened in 1885, and it happened in a diplomatic way. So with the support of Russia and some other big powers, somehow this autonomous part, Eastern Romania, it was recognized, although several years later, the unification between the Principality of Bulgaria and Eastern Romania was happened. It became a fact and later on recognized by all the big powers. But what remained out of the state were the Bulgarians in Macedonia, because Macedonia remained completely in the borders of the Ottoman Empire. So this was the reason for the First Balkan War, because as I mentioned before, Macedonia was divided between Greece, Serbia, and Bulgaria, geographically parts of this area, Macedonia. But so those three countries claimed parts of Macedonia. That's why the three countries united themselves against the Ottoman Empire with the purpose to liberate Macedonia. So it was the First Balkan War. It was a successful one. And actually, it happened in 1912. 1912, the First Balkan War. Geographically, Bulgaria had to fight with the Turks very close to the center of the empire, very close to Constantinople, because it's the proximity, the geographical proximity. And the Greeks and the Serbs, they fought actually in the Macedonia itself. So after the First Balkan War, Macedonia was liberated, but the three countries couldn't divide it between themselves. So Bulgaria considered herself, cheated by the allies, by the Greeks and the Serbs, because they had the factual occupation of Macedonia. Their troops were there. So they refused to give Bulgaria a substantial part of Macedonia. This was the reason for the Second Balkan War the next year, 1913, the Second Balkan War, which was Bulgaria against everyone. So it was our king Ferdinand who gave the order to attack its former allies, Serbia and Greece. And the Romanians took opportunity as well, although they had nothing to do with Macedonia, but took the opportunity that Bulgaria is in a difficult position. So they attacked Bulgaria also from the north. The Serbs and the Greeks also attacked Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire also took advantage and attacked Bulgaria. So the Second Balkan War was a disaster. Bulgaria lost everything and lost Macedonia again. It was divided between the Serbs and the Greeks. So it will be, the main purpose and the main pain of the Bulgarians, this national unification, these brothers in Macedonia that we couldn't liberate and, to become part of the Bulgarian kingdom. So that's why it's isolated and angry Bulgaria found it easy to ally itself with Germany and Austro-Hungary during the First World War. Two powers that were promising to restore the territorial settlement of the Balkan Wars in favor of Bulgaria. That's why we joined Germany. Second World War, this is why we joined Germany during the Second World War as well. And in the First World War, although the Bulgarian army was initially successful and captured a sizable part of the desired territories in Macedonia and Thrace, nevertheless, you know that the wider course of the war actually was not in favor. And at the end of the war, already in 1918, Bulgaria was drained of its powers. And in 1919, we have the Treaty of Nioy, which was a national catastrophe. Bulgaria lost the war, a lot of demographical losses. Many people died in this war. Huge reparations. Bulgaria had to pay huge reparations. And also the national unification didn't happen again. On the contrary, Bulgaria lost even more territories. So society was in crisis too. Between the two world wars, national salvation, national unification, Bulgarian patriotism were used as mottos by all kinds of political movements and organizations. Military, youth, or Macedonian organizations. So already in the 20s and especially in the 30s, we have this radicalization of the society and the idea again for revenge and for national salvation, national unification. And that's why actually Bulgaria joined Germany during the Second World War. But Bulgaria's position in the New World conflict was predetermined by one main factor. Bulgaria belonged to the group of losers of the World War I and had lost territories, economic potential, respect and self-confidence, problems very much familiar to Germany, of course. And so isolated and humiliated, Bulgaria made the natural choice for a partner, which is in the same situation. And nevertheless, when the war broke out in 1939, Bulgarian Tsar Boris declared neutrality. So Bulgaria stayed neutral for as long as it was possible. But actually, putting aside all the doubts and worries of Bulgaria, siding with the Third Reich, a small but influential group of politicians emerged who insisted that Bulgaria should grab its historical chance, because it was only Germany that promised to Bulgaria, yes, you can get what you consider is yours. The other big powers, they didn't promise anything, because they have other favorites countries here and more important for them in the Balkans. For example, the British, they always insisted on Greece. Greece was the first priority for them here in the region. So they would never take territories from Greece and to give to Bulgaria. So actually, the territories that Bulgaria claimed at that moment were part of Yugoslavia, because Macedonia was in Yugoslavia, and another territory populated by Bulgarians, which is in Greece, which is the part of Aegean Thrace. So actually, Bulgaria claimed territories in Greece and Yugoslavia. Only the Germans said, yes, we are anyway occupying these countries, so we have no problem to give you these territories. And when the German army approached the Balkan Peninsula in at the end of 1940, and the German troops actually were at the Bulgarian border, because Romania joined the Third Reich as well. So the Germans stayed at the Bulgarian border, and so it was for Bulgaria to decide either it would be occupied by the Germans and start fighting the Germans, being occupied by them for what reason, or to join the Third Reich and got the territories that considers that belonged historically or ethnically to Bulgaria. So Bulgaria joined officially the Third Reich on the 1st of March 1941 and became an ally. But it's the only ally of Germany that didn't fight, didn't participate into any military actions. It's the only German ally that didn't fight. Why? Because if you go to fight for the Germans, you have to go to the Eastern Front against the Russians. So Tsar Boris realized very well, and even Hitler realized that very well. That's why he didn't push much. He didn't insist on this. And Hitler accepted that Bulgaria would be an ally, of course, would provide resources and supply the German army and everything. But Bulgarians are the only allies of Germany that didn't fight on the Eastern Front against the Russians. You cannot motivate the Bulgarian army to fight against the Russians for the appetites of the Germans. So we didn't fight actually during the war, but we were German allies. And I see I have 10 more minutes, and I will mention another European exception. And this is the fact that the Bulgarian Jewish population was not deported. It's the only Jewish community, the whole Jewish community of 48,000 people that that survived the Holocaust, and nobody died as a Jew in Bulgaria. And how was that possible, actually, you will probably ask. So Bulgaria was a country allied with Germany. All the very hard, severe anti-Jewish legislation was imposed here. So we have a full, and very strict anti-Jewish, all the Jewish anti-Jewish laws. We have a written agreement between Bulgaria and Germany for the deportation of the Jews. And nevertheless, it never happened. For more than 3 years and a half, the Bulgarian Jews lived in the country under these circumstances, and nobody was deported. And although it was scheduled, the deportation, as an ally of Germany, we had to proceed with this. But there was a huge resistance in the society. The society was kept in the dark. Of course, this the Tsar and the officials, the government, they didn't say we are going to deport the Jews. Of course, it was secret. It was not published. All the decisions about the Jewish question were not published in the state journal. There were no public scrutiny over these decisions. But you know, the Jews and the Bulgarians, they've been living for centuries together. So people knew each other. They were friends, neighbors, and it started spreading, you know, the rumors that the deportation is scheduled. So we have huge reactions from all parts and kinds of the society. First of all, from the whole political spectrum, politicians from far left to far right, you know, raising their voice in defense of the Jews. Intellectuals, all the Union of the Bulgarian Writers, the Union of Bulgarian Doctors, the Union of Bulgarian journalists, and many others started, you know, writing petitions to the Tsar and the government. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church is the only church in Europe as an institution, not as individual acts. Individual acts we have everywhere, of course, but it's the only church as an institution that had the position in defense of the Jews from the beginning until the end, officially recorded, stated. So it was, and you will ask why it happened in Bulgaria and why it didn't happen in much modern countries. It happened in Bulgaria, which was with 80% rural population, not modern, not developed as the Western European countries, but still having this patriarchal moral and ethics. It's not because Bulgarians are especially good people or because they especially like the Jews. Nothing like that. I mean, in normal times, they view the Jews with indifference. You know, for 5 centuries, we've been living with Turks, Greeks, Jews, Armenians, whatever. No problem at all. So it was not because they loved the Jews, but they didn't hate it. And when you have this patriarchal moral and ethics, you simply see one of you, you know, being threatened his life for no reason. And there was a huge resistance from ordinary people to politicians, the church, intellectuals, unions, from the whole Bulgarian society. And why it happened, I think there are several factors here which make this case specific and made possible this to happen in Bulgaria. Why Bulgarians are not anti-Semitic? First, of course, because for centuries they lived with different ethnic and religious groups. But there is something else. Although Bulgarians are Christians from the 9th century, as we mentioned at the beginning, for some reasons unknown to me, they never became especially religious people in terms of really religious or fanatically religious or observant. No, they have the religion mostly like, you know, the rules, the customs, the identity, part of the identity. But somehow Bulgarians never accepted the religion too deeply. I don't know why. And it applies also to the other minorities in the country. Our Muslims were never fanatically religious, not at all. We never had religious Jews here, religious in the sense of they are all religious, but I mean, you know what I mean, Orthodox and fanatically religious. Our Jews never looked like Jews. They looked like the other people. We don't have this special attire, this special signs of the Jews or of the Muslims. So actually, they look the same like the others. They live the same, not separately. You know, they work together, live together with the Bulgarians, fought together. the Jews as loyal citizens of the state, and the state was loyal and good to them. They fought in all the wars for national unification. For all the wars, they fought side by side. So the Bulgarians perceive these people as part of them, you know. And another very important thing, that our Jews were never rich, especially rich. Of course, we have very rich Jewish families and individuals, but the majority of the Bulgarian Jews were, you know, just as poor as the rest of the Bulgarian population, if I could put it this way. So they were not rich. You cannot associate them with the Nazi propaganda and the image of the evil Jew, you know, either the Jew who is the agent of the Bolshevik evil, nothing like that in Bulgaria at the time, nor could be the Jew, you know, capitalist, sucking blood from ordinary people. It's something that it's not valid here. It cannot be applied to the Bulgarian situation. So none of the Bulgarian Jews was deported, actually. And it wouldn't be possible for them to live for more than 3 years and a half in the Bulgarian state under these circumstances if people were not supporting them, you know, because it's not like for a certain period of time, I will save you, I will hide you, you know, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. No, it was, you know, living in the Nazi Germany allied country, with very strict anti-Jewish legislation, with all the restrictions imposed on the Jews, and written agreement for their deportation. But actually, it didn't happen. The Tsar and the government, they didn't cancel it, but they didn't proceed with the deportation. And I will conclude with I will quote the German ambassador to Bulgaria, Beckerle, during the war. So I quote, he said, "Bulgarian society doesn't understand the real meaning of the Jewish question. Next to the few rich Jews, there are many poor workers and craftsmen. Having grown up with Greeks, Turks, Roma, and others, an ordinary Bulgarian doesn't understand the meaning of the struggle against Judaism, even more that the racial question from its nature is incomprehensible to him." So this lack of understanding of the religious and racial questions in Bulgaria is something positive. So I will stop up to here, and because the Second World War period, and especially the communist period, is very interesting. And I cannot, you know, summarize it in one lecture. So maybe one day, if you are interested, or the young students are interested in the communist period in Bulgaria, I would be delighted to speak also about this. And just to confirm my words that small countries are not masters of their own fate. Bulgaria was not a communist country as a strong movement, communist movement, or anything like that during the war. And comparing to Greece, for example, Greece during the war, the Second World War, there was a huge resistance, very strong communist movement. So in 1944-45, at the end of the war, if we look at Greece and Bulgaria, for example, two small countries, Greece was a communist country. Predominantly, I mean that the communist movement was really big and strong and supported by the people because of the German occupation and so on. In Bulgaria, on the contrary, small illegal communist party, yes, there is a resistance movement, but Bulgaria is not a communist country, it's a rural country. You have these rural owners of land. But nobody asked us or the Greeks what we would like to have after the war. It was just Churchill and Stalin, you know, who wrote on a napkin the percentage and the division of the sphere of influence. So they said Greece will be in the Western sphere of active influence. It's very important for the British. And Stalin said, okay, Bulgaria, of course, naturally will be in the Russian sphere of influence. So they simply put us nobody asked the winners, the Greeks, or the losers, the Bulgarians. Both small countries were just put, their fate was decided by the big powers. So it's another interesting period, the communist period in Bulgaria, and the transition period. But the time is over now, and it's time for questions.